We had a good bond. The oneness in that team really won us the gold medal. We fought, positive fighting. We get upset and then we make you smile and we keep going on. Well, welcome to It Was What It Was, the football history podcast. That was Daniel Amokachi, a former Everton, but more importantly for today's podcast, Nigeria striker, on an epic and really dramatic global tournament win. It's the Olympic win of 1996. Now, that may not resonate with British listeners because the Olympics obviously isn't a football tournament that registers much for us because we don't often have a team there. But in Africa, it was absolutely massive. This is the first global tournament that an Africa team wins, and they win it in extraordinary style. The semi-final and the final are just full of instant and with all the twists and turns that you would want from a major tournament win. And it's hugely significant. It's a coming of age for an African team on the world stage. Jonathan, this is absolutely your area of expertise. You love a bit of African football. I'm sure you loved this African win at a global tournament. Can you set the scene and just explain to us why this was important and why was it dramatic?
Well, I think we probably need a bit of context first. So African football really starts to become a major force in the 70s. There'd been the boycott of the World Cup in 1966 to get more representation. I'm sure we'll do an episode on that. There's reasons why the European powers were a little bit sceptical, but yeah, clearly Africa was massively underrepresented at the World Cup. They needed a guaranteed place. And you had Zaire were the first sub-Saharan African team to get there in 74. Again, I'm sure we'll do episodes on that because that was a tragic story as it turned out. But we'd seen Cameroon play very well at the World Cup in 82 when they'd gone out in the group stage unbeaten. They'd drawn all three games. They went out on goals scored against to Italy, who go on to win that tournament. We'd seen Algeria had been very good in that tournament. They'd beaten West Germany. We had Morocco's performances at the World Cup in 86. 1990, you might remember Egypt in England's group, but of course more famously Cameroon again get to the quarterfinals. So I think there was a sense at the beginning of the 90s. I mean, that's when Pele makes this famous and, as it turns out, completely wrong comment that an African team will win the World Cup by the end of the century. Well, they don't do that, but they do win an Olympic. They win two Olympics because Cameroon win it in 2000. But there is a sense in the 90s that African football is ready to explode. People are taking it seriously. In Cameroon, really, in 1990. They're the team that persuade people. Yeah, this isn't just a quirk. This isn't just sort of a happy underdog story. African football should be taken seriously.
But then the 96 Olympics come along. Explain the context of that. I always think as Nigeria as perhaps the powerhouse of Africa. Is it the most populous state with the biggest, deepest football culture? Would I be right in thinking that?
It's certainly the most populous state. I think it's 1 in 6 Africans are Nigerian. And I think that's an ongoing source of frustration for Nigerians that they really haven't achieved as a football nation what they should have done. And of course, you do get issues where the state in some ways is too big and you have all these competing groups within that state, which occasionally I think is a problem for squad unity, which is why I think Amokachi's comment about the oneness in that team is so significant. But we knew going into 96 that this was a very good side, but it's a very complicated situation. So the Cup of Nations in 94, the Africa Cup of Nations, Nigeria win that. It's played in Tunisia. They beat Zambia in the final. Now, this is a Zambia team, and we will definitely, and I think fairly soon, do an episode on this. This is a really, really good Zambia side, or it had been. And then in 93, there was the plane crash off Libreville that wiped out that entire squad, apart from Kalusha Bwalia, who played for PSV Eindhoven. So he was making his own way to a game in Senegal. And yet, a year later, they still get to the final of the Cup of Nations.
It's a heartbreaking and extraordinary story. Were you at that African Cup of Nations, were you? Or?
I was at the one that they won in 2012.
Okay.
When Kalusha Bwalia by then was the president of the Football Association, and seeing how emotional he was. But yeah, I mean, he's really even at this point, he's such a huge figure, done incredible things to put that squad together, but they lose in the final.
So in a sense, Nigeria were, I mean, not the bad guys, but you know what I mean? It's like everyone wanted Zambia to win, Nigeria win it, because Nigeria, as we've said, they have a very strong squad at this time in the early 90s. A lot of players beginning to play in the major European leagues, you know, including the Premier League, getting more representation there. That's presumably helping them, is it?
Yeah, I mean, at Belgium particularly, there's a little called Anderlecht, Stephen Keshi, who you may remember was their manager when they won the Cup of Nations in 2013, but has been Nigerian manager. He was a manager who qualified Togo for the World Cup, although in typical West African fashion, he managed to get himself sacked before the actual tournament. They appointed, what was he called? The Otto Pfister, the German. But yeah, this is a good squad. So, I mean, Augustin Eguavoen, who, very good defender. Again, you may remember him. He's had various stints as coach of Nigeria. Sunday Elise, really gifted deep lying midfielder, really elegant player. Finidi George, who played for Ipswich, a winger, was at Ajax as well. Emmanuel Amuneke, JJ Okocha. Of course, we sort of saw the glorious tail to his career at Bolton, but did great things in Germany, did great things at PSG. Daniel Amakachi, who turned that FA Cup semi-final in 1995. Rashidi Yakini, another tragic story, died in very strange and very sad circumstances. But you might remember him from a World Cup in '94. He's the first Nigerian ever to score at a World Cup. And that iconic celebration where he's sort of clinging to the net, sort of kissing the net and crying. And we'd seen it at that World Cup in '94, just how good Nigeria were.
They were a strong team there, weren't they? And they got to the knockout stages.
They got to the last 16.
Yeah.
So they beat Bulgaria and Greece. They're in that group with Argentina. So we do lose to Argentina. But there's 3 teams win 2 games in that group. And they end up, it's slightly odd, they end up topping the group and then having to play Italy. So they might have been better off if they hadn't topped the group. Mm-hmm. But they're leading Italy 1-0 with 2 minutes to go. And then Roberto Baggio scores again in extra time and they go out. But they've played really well at that tournament. So they really look like a side who could dominate African football for the remainder of the decade. And then, as so often in Africa, politics intervene. So in November 93, there'd been a military coup. Sani Abacha, a general who was defense minister, he seizes power. And even by the standards of West African dictators, he's a pretty unpleasant man. And the issue that really gains sort of traction in the rest of the world, the rest of the world notices, is the case around Ken Saro-Wiwa, who was a novelist. He'd accused Shell, the oil company, of waging ecological war in the Niger Delta, and particularly the homeland of the Ogoni people. He was Ogoni. And then in May 1994, so this is between the Cup of Nations win and the World Cup, just to try and give you the football context of that, 4 leaders of the Ogoni who'd clashed with Saro-Wiwa over strategy, they're murdered. And Saro-Wiwa and 8 other members of the Ogoni people who were protesting in Shell are arrested and they're charged with the murders. So they become known as the Ogoni 9, and they're convicted in a highly flawed trial. I mean, Shell later pays compensation. They admit collusion in that legal process, and the Ogoni 9 are sentenced to death.
So yeah, this would be a classic case, I think, of when historians look at the history of Africa, a major Western corporation colluding with dictatorship to extract raw materials and cash.
Yeah, I would say so. And I think that unfortunately is the story of Africa, really, that the Western companies exploiting natural resources, and people who stand up against that often end up being victims of it. And
you said they were sentenced to death. Was it actually carried out, the sentence?
Yes, they're hanged in the November of 95. And this is a key date for a whole number of reasons. But Nelson Mandela, who by this point is the leader of South Africa, so it's really, I mean, certainly as far as the West is concerned, the great leader of independent Africa. And he's been jailed by the apartheid South African state. So this sort of almost a secular saint.
Iconic figure, wasn't he? Because he'd just been released from jail and gone on to become president of the in theory post-racial South Africa. So everybody around the world would have seen Mandela as a kind of leader of Africa in a representative sense, wouldn't they?
Yeah, and so Mandela protests against these hangings, and he calls for sanctions against Nigeria. Now, South Africa, as part of their emergence from apartheid, they're going to be hosting the Cup of Nations in '96. And so as a warmth for that, they've got a 4-team tournament, and Nigeria is supposed to be one of as the African champions, they're supposed to be one of the 4 teams. And that's supposed to be in that November, just after Sarawiwa and the 8 others are killed. And so as part of the sanctions Mandela brings in, Nigeria's invitation to this tournament is withdrawn. Sani Abacha, the Nigerian dictator, reacts very badly to that. And he says, right, well, if we can't play in this tournament, we're not going to turn up for the Cup of Nations in '96. At which CAF then says, okay, well, then you're banned for '98 as well. And you see I think CAF probably had to do that, because you can't just have teams pulling out of tournaments for political reasons. But what that then means is probably the best, or certainly a team who would have been a serious contender. I don't want to demean South Africa's achievement in winning in '96 or Egypt's in winning in '98, but a team who would have been a major contender for those 2 titles is not there. And so possibly one of the greatest of African teams is not competing in the African tournament. So
a lost generation in a sense. They didn't have a chance to compete on their continental stage, which would have affected them on the global stage, because of course tournaments build team spirit, tournaments can build winning habits, can't they?
Yeah, and I mean, we're slightly moving away from the main point here, but I think it is significant that the Sarawiwa execution has actually a huge... I mean, basically, had Sarawiwa not been executed, I think there's a good chance Sepp Blatter would never become president of FIFA, which is a very odd result of that.
You're going to have to explain that little context in about 30 seconds, because
it's going to take more than 30 seconds. Give me 4 minutes. So João Havelange has become FIFA president in 1974. He's very good at mobilising Africa, a lot of his support base in Africa, and he often does deals with dictators. Now, the Under-20 World Cup was supposed to be being played in Nigeria the tail end of '95, and it's possible that was some kind of deal that was done to secure Nigeria's support for the US to host the World Cup in '94. That's never been made entirely clear, but that certainly is a suggestion. And then there's an outbreak of there's epidemics of meningitis, measles, and cholera in Nigeria, and that means a lot of the European teams are saying, well, not only are we not that keen on travelling to Nigeria for this tournament, but actually we can't even get insured for it. And so Havelange goes to see Abacha to say, look, I'm really sorry, but we're going to have to move the tournament. So they shifted to Qatar, which again is, knowing what we now know, is an indication of the way the tide
early days of Qatar appearing on the sports scene, yeah.
Yeah, and this of course is where Jose Peckerman's Argentina win the Under-20 World Cup for the first time. But Havelange goes to see Abacha, and he meets him. He has tea in the presidential palace 2 days after the executions. So Mandela comes out and condemns this. So 2 days later, by which point Havelange is in Prague, a journalist asks him about this and says, how can you justify having tea with Sani Abacha 2 days after these highly controversial executions? And Havelange then makes his absolutely fatal mistake of saying sport and politics should not be mixed. And the huge irony of this is that in '74, Sani Rouse, the Englishman he'd replaced as FIFA president, he had said, in the context of apartheid South Africa, sport and politics should not be mixed. So I think people often get this wrong. People think that Rouse was pro-apartheid South Africa. What he actually was, he was against a ban because of apartheid, which is not a good position to hold. I'm not saying it's a justifiable position, but it's not that he was pro-apartheid.
It's more, let's keep football out of this, because this ends in a bit like people say about the Russian boycott at the moment. Like, well, once you start boycotting one person, where are you going to stop, and where that kind of thing.
Yeah, but of course, to South Africa and to Mandela, this is this is nonsense. You can't keep these 2 things apart. You can't be doing a deal with Sani Abacha 2 days after, as Mandela sees it, he's murdered 9 of his own citizens.
It's obviously highly ironic that the most highly politicised organisation in the world, i.e. FIFA, is the one that constantly tells us to keep politics out of sport. But anyway. And
Havelange hadn't kept it out in '74. He'd be saying, no, sport must play its role. And so, Mandela turns against Havelange. And once that's happened, Havelange realises I can no longer win the FIFA presidency. And so he stands down for 98. And Blatter, who'd very much been out in the cold, having threatened Havelange in lead up to the 94 election, he becomes Havelange's man and is elected in 98. So the consequences of, I think this is probably the first sign where what appears an intensely local issue, I mean, horrific as it is, but essentially a local issue. Why would the rest of the world care if a dictator is killing a dissident novelist? It's happened throughout time in dictatorships, but this has huge, huge consequences for football. And I think this is the first time you really see just how interlinked these two things can be.
Fresh from recording the podcast with Miguel Delaney on Sports Washing, it reminds me of Jamal Khashoggi. That is one case, which is not a singular case in Saudi Arabia, but it's exploded into the public consciousness for various reasons. And this sounds rather similar. To get back onto the football, though, Jonathan, I see in the notes you say that the fact that they're being sort of isolated from African sport and they can't play in this tournament and they're not going to play in the Cup of Nations in 96 means that the Olympics becomes more serious. Would it otherwise not have been sort of high up their agenda, do you think?
Yeah, and I think you see this really clearly. So they've got to qualify against Kenya, and the home game, they basically pick home-based players. They don't bother European clubs to try and get their players back, and they draw it 0-0. And then before the second leg, they think, hang on, we've got to get serious about this. It might be they underestimated Kenya. That is also probably partly part of it. But Joe Bonfrere, the Dutch coach who's taken over, Clemens Vesterhoff had been the coach another Dutchman in 94. Joe Bonfrere, he makes a real effort to get the players back from Europe. And so the bulk of the squad that's won the Cup of Nations 94 happened to be eligible for the Olympics as an under-23 tournament. So you have the likes of JJ Okocha, Sunday Elisa, Daniel Amakachi, Victor Ikpeba, who was just coming through. But they also had a very good under-17 team who won the World Cup, the under-17 World Cup in 93. They're just ready to sort of graduate to a slightly more senior level. And in that team, you've got Kanu, Celestine Babayaro, Wilson Aruma, Mobi Operaku.
All very familiar names, particularly Kanu and Babayaro to English listeners at Chelsea and Arsenal. Yeah.
And Aruma, I mean, he played for Marseille for a while. He had a sort of itinerant career around France and Switzerland. But I mean, Operaku, I think, didn't really. I think was he on Anderlecht's books briefly? But I don't really think he ended up having a big European career. But it's certainly at that age, he looked highly promising. But yeah, Kanu, Babayaro, sort of mainstays in late 90s Premier League. Suddenly they have this great squad. They go to Kenya. Okocha is brilliant. They win 3-0. And by analogy with the US team in the 92, the US basketball team in the 92 Olympics, and with Cruyff's Barcelona, this team then becomes known as the dream team. So
every good team at this period gets known as a dream team, which originally is, as you say, the US basketball team at the 1992 Olympics. That's the first Olympics where pros are allowed to play in the basketball. So you get this amazing team of superstars for the USA. But everyone then gets that sobriquet, don't they? If you're any good, that is. And Nigerian team clearly is good.
But I think it's not just about being good. It's about having a real sort of style and swagger about you.
Yeah, and superstars in them. There's a lot of even to European eyes, there's a lot of recognisable names in that team.
And you look at how skillful a lot of those forwards are. I mean, JJ Okocha.
Yeah.
Amakachi, not sort of technically skillful in the same way. He's not a great dribbler.
But what a player. I mean, in terms of physical presence and holding the ball up. And
Victor Ikpeba, really gifted winger. I mean, I think there's reasons why his career didn't quite kick on as it might have done. That an incident that happened in the Cup of Nations in 2000 when in the shootout in the final, his penalty hit the bar, came down over the line and wasn't given. And Nigeria lost to Ghana. And that he was never quite the same.
VAR would have saved his career.
VAR would have saved his career, absolutely, yeah. Kanu, obviously, hugely gifted player. So there's a real swagger to this Nigeria. Next round of qualification, they play Egypt.
Which is a really tough game in Africa, isn't it?
Really tough game.
The premier African nation, or Nigeria and Egypt vying to be the premier African nation? I
think Cameroon and Ghana would like a word about that. But Egypt go on to win the Cup of Nations in 98. They qualified for the World Cup in 1990. They're a really strong team. And games in Egypt are always, I mean, I'm sure the Egyptians say games in Nigeria are really tough, but games in Egypt are always really tough. I've been to a Cup of Nations in Egypt in 2006 and 2019. And, the atmosphere at Egypt games is phenomenally intense. And this is where you first get a sense of this is a Nigeria team who are capable of doing really, really dramatic things. So it's 3-3 on aggregate going to the last minute, and Egypt are about to win on away goals. And then Victor Ikpeba scores a last minute equaliser in the leg, last minute winner in the tie, and Nigeria go through. And this
that's
is
in Cairo. They're playing in Cairo. The scenes in Lagos, I can imagine the scenes in Lagos. I mean, a last minute winner at the best of times is just extraordinary. But in an international tournament like this, when your national side does it, we England fans can remember scoring the last minute, recently against the Netherlands in the semi-final. It's just the best feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, this is also because of away goals.
Yes.
It's not even, we're about to have extra time. It's, we're going out, we're through.
Yeah, we're through because there's not enough time to really make that good again. I mean, just about, but not really.
And late winners will become a recurring feature. Dramatic late goals will become a recurring
I love a team. I mean, a truly great team has to have a lot of late winners. I think the reason why the Man United 99 team is so highly valued, even though you might argue other teams are better, is because of the manner of their victories.
Absolutely, yeah. So they then have one more qualifiers against Zimbabwe, who are led by Clemens Vesterhoff, who'd won the Cup of Nations with Nigeria in 94. They actually win it pretty easily. But then, more drama, the Zimbabweans say, no, we can prove that your goalkeeper, Abiodun Barua, is overage, that he doesn't qualify for this team. And it takes months for FIFA to kind of sort through this. And in the end, FIFA decide, no, this evidence is not conclusive. Nigeria, on you go to the Olympics.
So let's explain, and you'll have to fill me in what the rules are now. Generally, the rules for the Olympics are you're allowed 3 overage players and the rest have to be under 23, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's under 23 on January the 1st, I think.
Yeah, of the year.
So there's a
weird compromise because back in the day, FIFA didn't want there to be a rival to the World Cup. So for the women's game, there's no restrictions because at that time there wasn't a women's World Cup. For the men's game, they wanted to make it a kind of youth tournament, but then people wanted to bring their experienced players. So it's a hodgepodge of a compromise, isn't it?
And it was also because the Olympics for a while had a very strict definition of amateurism, which is why the World Cup is set up, because professionals needed somewhere to play international football. So it's
a very odd rule, but
once the Olympics has started to do away with amateurism or sort of be a bit softer in its definition, okay, we'll make it youth players. And obviously the communist countries were able to get around that rule quite easily, which is why
actually by 92, the whole point about the Dream Team is by 92, the Olympics have completely given up on that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anyway.
So they have a final warm-up game against Togo in Lagos, and they lose. They lose 3-1. Oh, no. So what had been the Dream Team then becomes known as the Dreaming Team. There's this mass panic. So Joe Bonfrere, to try and calm everybody down, he gets a local team called Shooting Stars, and he arranges another friendly, the Nigerian Olympic team against Shooting Stars. And this time, the Dream Team win it 2-0, and they set off for their training base in Tallahassee.
Is that enough to calm everybody down? Just being some sort of local anyway. It clearly was.
It's better than losing 3-1 to Togo, I guess.
Well, yeah, it is. But I'd have thought the Togo team was slightly more capable. That said, that's probably a good place to bring the first half of this Nigerian Odyssey to an end. In the second half, hopefully we're going to get on to the Olympics in Atlanta, 1996 in the United States of America. And this epic journey, I'm very much looking forward to this. So do join us in the second half to hear how Nigeria do pull this off.
Popsicles, sprinklers, a cool breeze. Talk about refreshing. You know what else is refreshing this summer? A brand new phone with Verizon. Yep, get a new phone on any plan with Select Phone Trade-in and My Plan. And lock down a low price for 3 years on any plan with My Plan. This is a deal for everyone, whether you're a new or existing customer. Swing by Verizon today for our best phone deals. 3-year price guarantee applies to then current base monthly rate only. Additional terms and conditions apply for all offers.
Buying a car in Carvana was so easy. I was able to finance it through them.
Whoa, wait, you mean finance?
Yeah, finance. Got pre-qualified for a Carvana auto loan, entered my terms, and shot from thousands of great car options all within my budget.
That's cool, but financing through Carvana was so easy.
Financed. Done. And I get to pick up my car from their Carvana vending machine tomorrow.
Financed.
Right, that's what I said.
You can spend time trying to pronounce financing, or you can actually finance and buy your car today on
Carvana.
Financing subject to credit approval. Additional terms and conditions may apply.
We hope you're enjoying the show. If you've got any thoughts on this episode or any stories from football history you want us to cover, follow us and leave a message at @itwaspod. That's @itwaspod. Well, welcome back to It Was What It Was, and we are hearing about the epic quest of the Nigeria team at the Olympics in 1996, the first global tournament won by an African nation. Jonathan Wilson is taking us through it. We've just got them en route to Atlanta and to the United States, so about to start their Olympic campaign. Jonathan, tee us up. How's it going? What's the mood like?
Well, I'm sure you, having covered many World Cups in which African teams have been involved, you'll be shocked to learn it's chaos. So they get to they're based in Tallahassee, and they get to it's a hostel basically where they're asked to stay, and the Brazil women's team are already there, and they're told, oh well, they've got the best rooms, you've got the next best rooms. And so, I mean, this is the reserve keeper, Joseph Dosu.
I'm sure that goes down well with the players. Is it almost like the officials are spending all the accommodation money on accommodation for themselves, and players are having to go a little bit cheaper?
Who knows? Or maybe nobody's bothered to book it till the last minute. And so he said, we say we're not staying there. They have to find us better accommodation. So they spend 5 hours trailing around Tallahassee and its environs looking for alternative accommodation, and we just find a motel.
This is like me going interrailing. This is basically what I used to do when I was in my 20s. So fair, they're in their early 20s. I'm sure they can cope with that. So
this is what Dosu says. It was a motel, the type where people just come in, do their business for an hour or so, and leave. The rooms were so dirty we had to clean up by ourselves before we could check in. So I
Why
guess
didn't they stay in the hostel if it was that bad? Basically, they're in a brothel, basically.
I mean, yeah, that does sound like it. But I guess what you would say is maybe it's the kind of thing that brings a squad together. I mean, this is one of Jack Charlton's big things. He felt that luxury hotels were bad for team morale because everybody sequestered themselves. Whereas if you gave people sort of Spartan basic accommodation, they had to spend time together because otherwise it's incredibly boring. And the sort of hardship made the bonds between players that much tighter.
But I also imagine it brings them together, and that they're probably raging at the officials, aren't they? And feeling like they've got to take things into their own hands.
Yeah, and again, not an uncommon story with African teams at major tournaments. The players then go on strike because they haven't been paid their bonuses. Joe Bonfrere, the coach, he's owed 3 months' salary. The players should have got bonuses for qualifying; they haven't got them, and so they say, right, we're not training until all this is settled. And the federation then decide, well, we don't really want to pay, or maybe they can't pay. So they go behind Bonfrere's back. They go to the assistant coaches, who many of them are Nigerian, and they say, look, can you ask the players and say, please, just, no one wants to embarrass the nation here. This is the Olympics. The eyes of the world are on us. But the players hold firm. So Daniel Amokachi said, we're a strong, united group. If we took a decision, we all stood by it. And I think actually the person who needs a lot of credit for this, even though he's not there, is Stephen Keshi. Stephen Keshi was known as the big boss, and some people would accuse him of running almost sort of a mafia-style operation. It's all right, we can say it, he died ages ago. Running almost a mafia-style operation to ensure that his people got picked, even when he was a player, when he was captain. But what he did do, he was very good at saying, no, we're international players, we're professional players, we have certain standards. And he was prepared to take the fight to the federation. And he was very tough and brave in doing that. And I think he's passed on that spirit to the players who've come after him. He retired in 94, I think. I think he went to the Cup of Nations, but was quite old by then and didn't play that much. But it's his influence, I think, that's given the players this sense of solidarity of, we can't let the bosses mess us around. We've got to stand up for ourselves.
So a couple of points from that. I think this often, as you intimated, happens at major tournaments where African players end up going on strike. And I think they're always very unfairly characterised because people tend to view them through a stereotype or prism of being greedy. But the reality is their federations are receiving money, maybe not for the Olympics, but their federations are being paid and they're not passing on the money to the players. So it is clearly frustrating that they see officials are getting salaries and they're the actual people doing the stuff on the pitch aren't. And so that's why it often comes to crisis point. Is it the case that because more, as you say, Keshi's, they're playing at major European clubs now, they're going, actually, we're not putting up with this. This wouldn't happen at Everton. This wouldn't happen at Internazionale. We're Nigeria. We're not having this.
I think it's two things. I think it's partly that they've seen how things should be, but also I think that gives them financial independence. If you're a Nigerian player based in Nigeria and you're taking on the Nigerian football bosses, well, that could have a serious consequence, not just for that tournament, but for your career going forward. Whereas if you're sitting on a big salary in Belgium or England or France or wherever, you're sort of like, well, I don't really need them anymore. I can, I've got a safety net there. I can afford to take this stand.
How do they find the money to pay them then?
So they have to turn to the Nigerian embassy in the US and they loan them the money to pay the players, which is
petty cash. What have you got in the safe? Oh, here's a few $100,000. Give them some money and get them paid.
But again, I think it's not what you choose for preparation. But in this instance, it does seem to work. So Amokachi says, we were one. We had our fights, we had our quarrels and our disagreements, but we always sorted ourselves out, and we knew it was all for the good of the team. So I think even among the players, you're reading between the lines there were disagreements on how far should we push this, but they have this sense of unity that you're not having players who are breaking off and say, well, I'm going to train, if I train, I'll get picked, I'll get to play in the Olympics. The players are all saying, no, we do this together. We are one squad united.
Tournaments are very strange beasts, aren't they, for team unity? How you get there almost doesn't matter. It might be that you have a luxury hotel and everyone's playing card games together all night and everyone's very happy. It might be that everyone's united against the press or the federation or another team. But the key thing is, because you have this very intense, almost Big Brother like reality TV camp for 4 to 6 weeks, you have to find something to bond around.
And the other thing they bond around comes up once they've sorted out the bonuses, which is the right back, Mobi Oparaku. He suddenly disappears. And Bonfrè's sort of, where's Mobi? Where's he gone? And nobody knows where he is. And he's missing for about an hour. And he comes back in, dragging a jukebox behind him. And he installs it in this motel, which I'm guessing is short on facilities. And the jukebox becomes the centre of the squad. So everybody sort of sits around that, and that becomes the real focal point where this unity is built further.
And this is undervalued, isn't it? I think this is why, say, austere regimes, so think of Fabio Capello's England, you get everything right professionally, you're eating the right food, you're not having ketchup, famously, blah, blah, blah. Actually, it's not always, the details are often in the spirit, the emotion. It's the emotional intelligence as well as the tactical intelligence that particularly wins you major tournaments, I think.
Yeah, I think that's completely true. And I think when you're together for a month, I guess is slightly less because it's a 16-team tournament, so 3.5 weeks, plus the week or so beforehand. You have to relax. You can't be focused all the time. And the jukebox is a way of both relaxing, but also providing this focal point for everybody to gather around. And I think, you must have done this as well, but I've spoken to so many people who played either successful World Cup squads or tournament squads that have failed. And the thing they always come down to, we all just went to our rooms and played PlayStation and nobody talked to each other. Oh, we all went around X's room and played in the PlayStation together. And the difference between the former and the latter is massive. The latter can win you the tournament. The former will never win.
And it does relate to performance on the pitch. It's not just like, a happy camp, we're all on holiday. It produces results, which is why, we did cover this in Gareth Southgate podcast and why he's a bit underrated in England, isn't it? It's why that's just as important as getting the 4-3-3 correct.
Yeah. And I think more than almost on a club level, because But you know,
much
it
more,
is
yeah.
it is so intense. Everybody together, and yeah, do you see this immediately that they beat Hungary 1-0, a 77th minute winner from Kanu, so a late goal
That's
again.
a late winner. We love a late winner.
They beat Japan 2-0, but that's 0-0 after 83 minutes. Then there's an own goal. Then Okocha gets a penalty in the last minute. So that's 2 goals in the last 7 minutes. So again, late goals, late winners.
See this in tournaments, it builds momentum back home, doesn't it? Because everyone's watching it, getting frustrated, and then there's this release of sort of emotion if you get a late winner.
And then that momentum just stalls briefly. Japan had beaten Brazil. So Nigeria playing Brazil in the last group game. So Brazil have to win to go through, assuming that Japan beat Hungary, which they do. So Nigeria have a chance. If they can draw, they will put Brazil out. And they lose 1-0 to a goal from Ronaldo. And Bonfrere is furious. He thinks that they haven't performed, that they've been a bit, we're already through, we don't need this. And so in the dressing room, he lashes out, he kicks out at everything in his path, and he ends up with all the skin on his big toe peeling off, because he thought, he's already thinking, we can win the gold here, and Brazil are going to be one of our major rivals. We could have killed them now, and we've missed our opportunity. And it's like a horror movie. If you haven't killed that zombie at the start, it's going to come back for you at the end. And so, sure enough, they beat Brazil again in the semi-final. They've beaten Mexico in pretty convincingly 2-0 in the quarterfinal, but they have to play Brazil again.
So they're going to come back. They've come second in the group, so they've gone through, but they haven't finished off. And Brazil must be the overwhelming favourites, are they not? If they've got Ronaldo in the team, and they must have a fantastic side.
Brazil have a ludicrous squad if you read down it. So it's Gida in goal, Zimmeria at right back, Alvear and the old Dow, the really old Ronaldo, Roberto Carlos, Zé Elias, Amaral, Flavio Conceição, Juninho Pernambucano, Ronaldo, Bebeto.
That's Middlesbrough's Juninho.
No, it's the Lyon one.
Leon, but they've got Ronaldo and Bebeto up front, for goodness sake.
Well, they got Rivaldo on the bench. It's a very, very, very good squad. They're managed by Mario Zagallo, who's a World Cup winning manager,
World Cup legend. Yeah.
I mean, the Argentina squad is also very, very good, it should be said. But yeah, I think Brazil must have been favourites.
The other thing we should add for UK listeners is these are massively important tournaments in South America, aren't they? You lose your job as Brazil or Argentina manager if you do badly in the Olympics. I know that's hard for England, Scotland fans to get their heads around, but it's absolutely true that they take it seriously, because remember, Argentina don't win many Olympic gold medals in the way Britain now knock them off quite easily. This is their big medal chance. Same for Brazil. They win slightly more gold medals at the Olympics, but football obviously is their number one sport.
Yeah, I mean, there was that obsession in Brazil about winning an Olympic gold, because he didn't do so till he did it in Rio in 2016, which is why Neymar played in the Olympics, didn't play in the Copa America that year, which to a European mind looks bizarre, but they were so hung up on the fact they hadn't won gold. And I think this clearly was a squad that very easily could have won gold. But the Nigerians, they get this additional motivation at the start. So as they get towards the stadium, it's Sanford Stadium in Athens, Georgia, 70,000 plus crowd, and their bus gets there first. And the officials say, "Oh, can you wait? We want to let Brazil in first." And Amokachi and the others, Amokachi, you get the sense, is the real sort of barrack room leader here. No, we're here first. We're going in first. Why do they get to go in first?
Amokachi the Gary Neville of this side. The Red Nev.
Yeah, it does sound like it, yeah.
Edit that out, Patrick. Patrick's our producer, I should say. I'm sure he'll leave it in.
So Joseph Dossi, the reserve keeper. I think he's become the first choice keeper by this point. He says, Daniel was not the captain, but he was a real leader. He told him we're going nowhere and warned the driver that if he moved aside, he'd never drive that bus again. And so Nigeria get to go in first. And this is this great little victory.
That's a proper standoff, psychological sort of like really key moment, isn't it? I remember the moment when the England rugby team refused to budge for the Irish national anthem in Dublin, didn't they? And it became like an iconic key moment. We're not backing down. But sometimes you get these confrontations. They must feel really denigrated though that Brazil are like the favourites. They're the wonderful Brazil must go in first. You're just Nigeria. I guess you can really use that, can't you?
Yeah, that's what Amokachi says. We knew we could beat them then. But to be treated like that made us feel insulted, and we were determined to prove them wrong on the field. And they've also, of course, they've got Joe Bonfrere saying, you shouldn't even have to play this game. This is your fault. You even having to play them. This is all on you. I told you not to let them win, and you did. And now look what's happened. But it begins horrendously badly. So all this talk about how they're hyper motivated doesn't really help in the first half. So there's a Flavio Conceição free kick, goes through the wall in the first minute, so they're 1-0 down straight away. Roberto Carlos then scores an own goal. I think it's an Amuneke drilled cross that he turns in at the back post after 20 minutes. It's 1-1. And then Bebeto knocks in a rebound after 28 minutes. Flavio Conceição scores again just before half time. It's 3-1 at half time.
Sorry, they're 3-1 down at half time. So can I just interject a little bit here then? Do we just back project this sort of bus story onto it? Because obviously it's been a complete disaster for. I mean, I do sometimes as historians and football journalists, we find these iconic moments, then we back project them because clearly, as you said, it hasn't helped them in initial. Maybe they're too hyped up. Maybe they're too focused on it. But
possibly. It's a bit like in the 2009 Champions League final. All those Barcelona players talk about the video that Guardiola showed them. I think it was a gladiator music and it's incredibly stirring. But they're crap for 10 minutes. Like, if that was meant to get them going from the start, it really doesn't.
Yeah. They get battered by Man United for 10 minutes and then they absolutely take Manchester United apart with one of the great performances, don't they? So
if it really was that video, why does it take 10 minutes to kick in? Doesn't make any sense.
But maybe you could argue that Nigeria, when they're down and out, they have deeper reserves to dig on because they go, right, you've insulted us. We can't let this be another insult on a pitch. I guess that's where a psychologist would.
They have this sort of stubbornness, this resilience. That's exactly. If you want to make that case, that's the case you'd make. I mean, the players when you talk to them now, they say, we were thinking maybe just take the 3-1 defeat. We don't want to get beat 5-6-1.
That's a classic. If you're losing 3-1 to Brazil at half time, it's like don't lose 6-1 because that really is going home to be pelted by tomatoes and worse, isn't it?
But Bonfrere says, no, we can still win this. So he takes off Operaku, the right back, brings on Wilson Aruma. They go to 3 at the back. And Aruma's sort of quite an attacking box-to-box style midfielder. Initially, nothing happens. So again, all the talk about kind of, this brilliant sort of tactical switch. But with 12 minutes to go, Victor Ikpeba pulls one back. And it's interesting, actually, his celebration is very much, we're going to do this. You can see, maybe I'm back projecting the body language, but it's not sort of, so there's two things don't happen. He doesn't sort of shrug and sort of think, it doesn't matter. Neither does he run and get the ball. It's sort of, he takes the plaudits as if he assumes they will score again. And the last minute, JJ Okocha long throw, ball falls in the box. There's a bit of a scramble. And when I first saw it, I had no idea what had happened. But the ball's scuffed in to Kanu, who's in the 6-yard box. He knows the keeper, Gida, is right behind him. And so he has this astonishing presence of mind that he flicks the ball up to get it above Gida and then hits it on the volley over him into the net.
That's very Kanu behaviour. He absolutely had that in his game, didn't he? I mean, he could be a frustrating player, but he had moments of impudence and brilliance that was hard to replicate.
The clarity of thought, I don't think I've ever seen anybody do that before. Yeah, anybody else would be thinking, I've just got to deflect it towards goal because there's players all around me. Yeah. But he thinks, no, I can flick this up slightly. Nobody's going to get close enough to me. And once it's in the air, I am going to score.
The astonishing thing about a great footballer is he's thought all of that. You've articulated that in about a second and a half. It took him about hundredths of a second to analyse that and execute.
Yeah. And as I say, it's so bewildering that when you first see it, you can't work out how the ball. When you first see it, you think he sort of somehow scuffed it under the keeper. And it's only the camera behind the goal you realise what he's done. But you see from his celebration, like he's got that sort of grin of "I'm amazing" on his face, and it's totally justified in that instance. And I think it's a competence in that the game finishes 3-3, goes to extra time, but it's golden goal extra time in those days. And 4 minutes later, he scores the winner, and they've beaten this great Brazil side. Amakachi's been brilliant. Kanu's been brilliant. Okocha's been brilliant. It's this incredible result. And they're 3-1 down with 12 minutes to go, and they win the game 4-3 with, 3 goals in, 16 minutes plus a bit of injury time.
You can imagine the scenes in Lagos, and you can imagine how empowering this feels for, as you say, the biggest African nation. I mean, I do think we should pick up on Bonfrere, that a great coach can change the narrative at halftime, can't they? And I think that idea of we're not just playing to be sensible and keep the score down and maybe nick one later, but communicating the message that we can win this. You need a lot of things to go for you. So there's the bus incident, there's having a great team, but a coach who can change the narrative of his players like that. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. But then they still have to play Argentina in the final.
Still got a final. Well, I imagine they feel like they've got all the momentum. The danger is you're so overcome with beating the great mighty Brazil that you think, well, maybe that's our gold medal moment. The odd thing about the Olympics is, unlike a World Cup final, you can kind of go, well, we got the silver medal, we guaranteed a medal now, so we're all going home with Olympic silver. It's weird how the Olympic works. It is slightly different to the World Cup and the Euros. That would have been a real great temptation for them, I think, to think, well, everyone's going to be proud of us and we're going to go home with silver medals.
Yeah, I guess there is a truth to that. But I think you often just see in any tournament that these big emotional wins often leaves a team drained for the next game.
Yeah,
and I mean, listen to this Argentina team. Again, it's a ridiculous team.
Just looking at it, it's basically the great Argentina side that doesn't win a World Cup, isn't it?
So they've got Pablo Caballero in goal, Zanetti, Ayala, Sensini, Chamot across the back, Matias Almeida, Christian Basadas, Hugo Morales, Ariel Ortega in midfield, and Crespo and Claudio Lopez up front. And the manager's Daniel Passarella. So it's
astonishing pedigree and some great young players in that. They will go on to be the mainstay of the Argentina team over the next decade, won't they?
Yeah, and so again, Nigeria go behind very early. This time it's the 3rd minute. Claudio Lopez scores the header.
Another great team talk then.
And then Babayaro equalises after 28 minutes. A really big header at the back post. Really gets high. So 1-1 at half time. And then early in the second half, Ariel Ortega goes down very softly in the box. But I think it was Colina refereeing it, gives the penalty, and Crespo scores. So it's 2-1. But Nigeria always score late goals. 74th minute. So again, it's from a throw-in, but this one is flicked on, comes Amakachi at the back post, and there's this weird little sort of scoop chip. It's again a bit like the Kanu equaliser. It's not as good as the Kanu equaliser, but it is this improvised finish. So 2-2. Then the final minute, there's a free kick on the left, swung in. Argentina push out, trying to play offside. Amuneke sweeps in this volley. You look at it, he's sort of 3 or 4 yards from the nearest defender by the time he scores. But you pause it, as I did this morning, at the moment the free kick's taken. There's one Nigerian player in the middle who, it's very tight, might be offside, but Amuneke clearly comes from behind the line. He's definitely onside. I don't think the laws as they were at the time would have considered either of the other two players to be interfering. As I say, it's very tight, one of them. But Amuneke is the nearest to the ball, and he's definitely come from an onside position. And so they've scored this last-minute winner. And they've beaten this great Argentina team, and they've won the gold medal, the first ever African team to win a global football tournament at senior level. So
you as the VAR referee are saying that's definitely a goal. You've gone back and checked it and given them the all clear. What's the effect like in Georgia, in America for the team winning this? And what's the effect and the repercussions or the reaction in Lagos and Nigeria?
I vaguely remember. I think I was on Sunderland's pre-season tour of Ireland at the time, and I
well placed to comment on both those.
So yeah, what I can say is that the people of Sligo, they were mad for it. I can't remember which. I remember watching it on TV in a crappy hotel room somewhere in Western Ireland. But I think there's a general sense that people had really got inspired by the Cameroon story in 1990. They liked the sort of the spirit with which West African teams at the time played, the style of football which they played, the focus on technique, the very attacking style of football. And so I think, and it's a great underdog story. They're not beating sort of average European teams. Maybe we didn't realise quite how good those Brazil players, those Argentina players were going to go on to become, but you knew they were really, really good teams. We'd seen a lot of that Nigeria side in '94 at the World Cup, and I think a lot of people, had sort of developed an affection for them there. So I think they did have a real sort of, there's a warmth of feeling behind them. Obviously, Nigeria, people go berserk. This is an extraordinary achievement. But I think at the same time, slightly tempered by the thought of, we could have won another Cup of Nations. We should have won the Cup of Nations in South Africa in 96, which, I mean, would have denied African football one of its great stories of South Africa winning on home soil. The equivalent of South Africa winning the Rugby World Cup the previous year. But then, of course, they're thinking, well, we got the World Cup in 98 to come. And, this being Nigeria, things start to get complicated pretty quickly. So Bonfire quits soon after the World Cup.
Is it because he hasn't been paid his bonuses?
I assume it is just a difficulty of dealing with the authorities. And this is seen as a great insult to Sani Abacha. So they then cycle through a load of coaches. So they go through Shehu Amadou, Philippe Trissier, one of the great itinerant coaches. He manages 4 games. The Monday Sinclair comes in. And then eventually they turn to one of the great journeyman coaches, Bora Milutinovic. So he's appointed towards the tail end of December 97. And his results are absolutely terrible. So...
But you call him a journey. Bora was one of the great national team coaches. He had great World Cup records with different nations, didn't he?
Well, he'd managed Mexico in 86, Costa Rica in 90, USA in 94, all of whom you would say had done better than anticipated. Yeah. So in that sense, he's a logical appointment, but
not a Nigerian legend.
So the games under him, they beat Iran 1-0, they beat Hong Kong 11 2-0, they then draw against Jamaica. They lose to Germany. They lose to Yugoslavia. They lose 5-1 to the Netherlands. This is in June 98. So that's their final qualifier before the final warm-up game before the World Cup. So I spoke to Bora about this, and he said, I just thought I was going to get sacked. I was, every time I went back to the hotel room, I was looking at the phone, waiting for it to ring. So 5 days before Nigeria start their tournament, I think it's 2 days before the actual World Cup starts, he's in his room. And sure enough, the phone does ring, and he thinks, oh, well, this is it. All I've got to do is try and get my payoff and get out.
Yeah. That might be trickier than
and
he imagined. But anyway.
He answers the phone, and it's somebody from Nigerian Football Federation, and they say, it's all right, Bora, you're safe. Sani Abacha died last night. And Abacha's death, he died on the night of the 8th of June, 1998.
The president's died, but this is entirely unexpected. He's not ill, is he?
No, it's a sudden heart attack, which has prompted a whole load of conspiracy theories. So what Bora said was that he had been told that Abacha had multiple prostitutes with him and had possibly engaged in cocaine as well, which I guess might overexcite your heart. But there's all kinds of rumours that he was poisoned, possibly by these prostitutes. Mossad supposedly involved. I'm not really sure why Mossad would gain by killing somebody.
Israel has a huge interest in Nigerian political affairs, but
anyway, it saves Bora's World Cup. And
in a manner of speaking, it does. Yeah, it saves him from being sacked. But
it starts really well. They beat Spain 3-2. You might remember brilliant Sunday Elise goal in that game. They then beat Bulgaria 1-0. They then lose to Paraguay, having already qualified. They're playing Denmark in the last 16.
Yeah, but this is the worst thing for any African nation to do at the World Cup, is to get very excited, to play really well in the first couple of games. Everyone hugely excited, saying, oh, it's coming, the Nigerians are coming, and then what happens in the last 16?
And if they win that, they're thinking we got Brazil in the quarterfinal, and they're thinking it's a rerun of the Olympic semis. And I think they're already focusing on that. And Denmark beat them 4-1, and for Nigeria, it's all over.
And for Nigeria, it's not that they've obviously had a good team since then, and they've won trophies since then. But in terms for Nigeria and for African football, from this point, we are expecting this Olympic Games to be a lift-off for global success, and it just isn't. So what's going on there, Jonathan?
I mean, that's a question with a very big answer. But yeah, I mean, Cameroon do win the next Olympics, and Senegal do get to the quarterfinal of the World Cup in 2002. But since then, it's been pretty slim pickings. You had Ghana got to the quarterfinal in 2010. Obviously, the Luis Suarez handball away from getting to the semis. But before people get too excited about that, they were very fortunate to get out of the group. The handball in the Serbia-Australia game that wasn't given, had it been given, Serbia scored the penalty, Ghana wouldn't even have got through. And then you've had no African teams getting through to the knockouts in the African World Cup. We had Morocco got to the semi-final at the last World Cup, so that they were the first semi-finalists. But yeah, there's been no... It does feel like African football hasn't really kicked on in terms of its likelihood of winning the World Cup from this team in the mid-90s. What I think has happened is that the pyramid may not have got any higher, but it has definitely got broader. And I think that is the positive. If you're looking for positives, that's what you'd say, that the Cup of Nations now, every tournament, there are 8 or 10 decent teams who have a chance of winning it. And that makes it a very fun tournament. That's not the top has dropped to meet the rest. The rest have risen, but they haven't risen necessarily in relation to the rest of the world. And I think African football, like so much in Africa, is held back by difficulties with infrastructure and with corruption.
Yeah. And if you take the European leagues, maybe this is a very Eurocentric view to take, but the European leagues would tend to be the richest and probably the highest performing in the world. There's never been more African players in the major European leagues than there is at the moment.
Which is very, very good in some ways, but the problem is that devalues the local leagues, and so people don't go and watch the local leagues, and that makes the economic problems even worse. And I've been some countries is different. So Cameroon, Ivory Coast, I think you do get decent crowds at games. But I've been in countless Cups of Nations where you'd be talking to a taxi driver or somebody in a restaurant or somebody you bumped into on the street or whatever, and you say, "Are you going to go to watch any of the games?" And they're like, "Oh yeah." And you're, "Well, have you got a ticket?" "No, I'll just go to the bar." But for them, going to games is going to the bar and watching the Premier League. It's not going to the stadium. And when you have big stars, if you had an Eto'o or a Drogba or whoever, Mohamed Salah playing in the stadium a half a mile away, and there's often very little interest in bothering to go, which is partly because stadiums are dangerous in Africa, and conditions aren't necessarily particularly
as we've
good.
seen tragically at recent
in Yaoundé at the Cup of Nations where 8 people were killed. Yeah.
And so just to finish up, I mean, let's put you on a spot and go back to Pele's quote. So, at what point will an African team win the World Cup? Is it the case of if you bring in a super coach like Carlo Ancelotti, everything will be fine? I'm guessing it's more the infrastructure behind the scenes and the administration needs to be in sync as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're looking for positives, the last 3 Cups of Nations have been won by domestic coaches, which is, they're not just bringing in journeyman Frenchmen or a Boris Milutinovic or a Philippe Troussier. So I think that's a positive sign. I think you have to develop local coaching, but fundamentally, what you're relying on is a group of players probably who've been educated and trained in Europe, which is the case for the majority of that Morocco side. They've had the benefit of an incredibly high-level education, footballing education, at PSG or at Marseille or Lyon, one of the French academies, which for North African teams is often the case. And then they come together and they develop this momentum like this Nigeria side developed. But I think it's really difficult when young players in their mid-teens are being distributed across the world, and you don't really get that sort of sense of common purpose, that sense of unity, that sense of an identifiable Nigerian, Cameroonian, Ivorian, whatever football culture, that could be something to drive them forward.
Well, Jonathan, this has been a fascinating journey through a story I knew a little bit about, but I now feel like I've got much more detail on it. I want to go back and watch some of those games. We know that for African listeners and particularly for Nigerian listeners, this is a huge moment, and it's definitely, given your expertise, Jonathan, somewhere we're going to go and visit in the future, aren't we? Many more African stories to come. So thank you for listening to It Was What It Was this week, and we hope you'll join us next time on the Football History Podcast.
Popsicles, sprinklers, a cool